All right, everyone. So welcome to day 4. And before we jump into our talk about web stuff, we're going to go over milestone 0. So yesterday night, you guys should have all submitted milestone 0, and we stayed up until 4 a.m. yesterday categorizing your ideas. So here are some of the results. So this is a percentage of all the ideas that fall into several categories that we determined here. So as you can see, there's 30% planning ideas. So this is not to say that you shouldn't do planning ideas. Just be careful, because it's kind of hard to make ideas that have been done before sound interesting. As we said before, truly new ideas are hard. So it's okay if something like this has been done before. So if you take a unique spin on it or target a specific audience that's different from what's been done before, then it'll make it new and refreshing. Okay, so we have planning, social. So this is like social networks and things like that. Media, which is anything to do with news or politics or Twitter and Facebook, things like that. We had academics, so like planning your course road is something that falls in there. Sharing, which is like sharing groceries, sharing apartments, sharing cat fairs or something like that. Food, as you can imagine, and a couple other ones. I think silly and other were the ones where if we didn't know what you were talking about, but they were there. So let's go on to our topic today. So today we're going to be talking about AJAX. So a quick recap of the past 2 days. On Tuesday we talked about client-side technologies. So this is how your browser renders HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to display the web pages that you commonly use every day. And then yesterday we went over simple servers. So how to set up servers with Node and Express. And today we're going to be talking about AJAX. So you saw yesterday how routes can be used to link up the client side, like when you navigate to a certain extension, or not extension, but like URL, and then the server has to figure out what page to give back. So AJAX is sort of like an extension of that. And AJAX just stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So the key word here that you need to worry about here is just JavaScript. This is just JavaScript. It comes pre-installed, or not pre-installed, but it's built on top of the native JavaScript that's in your browser, so you don't need to install anything, which is great. And you don't need to worry about this XML part. No one really uses that. So let's pretend it doesn't exist. So does anyone remember what asynchronous means, or can explain what asynchronous means? And what does synchronous mean? Okay. Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't go in the order that you give it. Sometimes, so if you remember the mailbox analogy. Oh, sweet. So if you remember the mailbox analogy, say we have like a click handler, whenever someone clicks on something, then the browser gets a message that says, okay, this object was clicked, and then you run a function that does something with that event. So you don't know when you're going to get a click, but it's going to happen at some random times. So you need to react to that. And so it doesn't execute in order. Yeah. So let's look at how normal requests work. So this is, say, if you click on a link in your browser, or you type a URL into your address bar. So the client, which is your browser here, sends an HTTP request to the server. So this is saying, server, give me this page, right? So the server says, okay, sure, here's a web page. So this is how normal requests work. Now we look at AJAX. So instead of sending an HTTP request, we send an AJAX request to the server, and this is saying, server, I need some data. Here's some information that you can use to generate this data. And the server says, here, have some data. We'll go into this a little more depth in the later slides. But this is just an overview of how it works. So a quick note is that the key value here is that there's no page load. So if you ever use learning modules and you ever refresh learning modules, you notice it takes a long time to load. So this really sucks. People don't really like waiting for page loads, right? So AJAX helps to make your pages feel more responsive by acting asynchronously, so you don't have to reload the page every time. So imagine that you're infinite scrolling in Facebook, and you have like a lot of posts already like loaded, and you try to add a new post. So if you had to refresh the page when you did that post, it would take longer than you want, and maybe people would leave the site. But in Facebook, the post is asynchronous, so that means that it just gets added to the page really quickly, and it feels more responsive that way. So the key thing about AJAX is that you don't have to reload the page. So if you noticed yesterday while you were doing the workshop, after you submitted each form, it would refresh the page. You wouldn't see it because it would be really fast, but today we're going to expand on that workshop, and so you don't have to reload the page after submitting the form. And you'll see how we do that later. Okay. So a quick note about JSON. So this just stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it's just a way that JavaScript uses its syntax to denote objects. So it looks something like this. If you've ever seen Python dictionaries, it kind of looks like that. You can think of that in the same way. So you have a list of properties and colon to the values. And these values can be anything. They can be more objects, strings, or numbers. Yes?
Why are we using weird relation marks?
I don't know. What's weird about them?
I mean, not straight.
Oh, I think that's just how like PowerPoint renders the
Yeah,
quotation
I'm
marks.
sure JavaScript will
Okay. Okay. Well, it doesn't really matter. They're just quotation marks. Nothing special about them. Yeah. So you can access the members array here just with this. So same as Python dictionaries. Yeah.
How's JSON like different from other sort of like JavaScript objects?
It is JavaScript. They are JavaScript objects. Yeah. They are JavaScript objects. That's why it's called JavaScript object notation. So it's just a way that to show JavaScript objects. Okay. Yeah. So looking at a high level of AJAX requests, you, the client, are sending a JSON object to the server, and the server is sending back a JSON object in the form of data. There's a little bit more complexity in there, and we'll go over that real soon. So we'll look at the parts of a request. So there are three main parts. You have the URL, the type, and the content. So it's kind of like a package. The URL is where to send the request, so like the address that you want to send the request to. We have the type, which can be get, post, put, delete. We talked about these yesterday, so if you remember the routing part where we mentioned the request types, this is the same kind of thing. Again, we only care about two of them, get and post. You probably won't use the other ones too often, if at all. So as a review, get is for viewing and retrieving data, and post is for creating or editing data. So if you wanted to find a user, then you would primarily use get. If you wanted to add a user, you would use post. So something like that. Okay, and the last thing is the content. So this is the data that you're sending to the server, and you're saying, here server, have this data and do something with it. So AJAX is like calling a function on the server. You're giving the server some input values, and the server is doing some calculations, and then when it's done, it'll get back to you and say, here, I calculated this thing. You can do it. You can do whatever you want with it. So there you go. So now we'll walk through a sample how you would use AJAX requests in the client side with jQuery. So here we have this $.ajax function, and this is built into the jQuery library, and this is how you primarily use AJAX calls. So remember, this $sign stands for jQuery, so it's not some reverse reserve thing. Yeah. Okay, so now we can break down this giant block of code into the pieces that we talked about earlier. So we have this URL : search. So this is the URL, of course. And then we have the type here. So this is a get request to /search. And we have the data. So this is represented as the JSON object that I was talking about before. There's a class property that maps to web programming. So you can think about it as we're trying to find a set of classes that have term web programming or whatever. So there are two other things that you need to specify. One of them is called the success callback. So because AJAX is asynchronous, we need to specify a callback, so a function that is run after we get the data or after the command is finished. So in this case, it's this success callback, and it takes in this data value. So this data value is different from the data value that we're sending to the client. This is sending to the server. This data value inside this success callback is the data that we're getting back from the server after we do this search get thing. So we'll take in this data. In this case, we'll just console.log it to our console, and we'll just say data loaded, yay. Yeah. So this is what's run after the AJAX request is finished. And this is the error callback. Strictly speaking, you don't really need it, but it's good to handle your errors appropriately. So in case the server goes down or something, or it gives you weird data, then it'll say, oh, there's an error, and then you can debug from there. Yeah. Okay, so now we'll look at it from the server side. So this is how the server receives these AJAX requests from the client. So as you can see, it's pretty similar to how we did it yesterday, except instead of serving up web pages, so we did leave res.render. Today we'll be doing res.send. So you're sending data back to the server instead of a whole web page. So here we break up the parts of router.get. So we have the first part, which is the URL, and it matches up with the other one. And we have the type here, which is get. So you can see that we're on the receiving end now. Okay. And this is how you retrieve the variables that were in your data object that you sent as the client to the server. So it's passed into the request object that's in the callback of this router.get, and you can access it with ref.query, and then you pass it whatever string property that you have. So if you look here, you can see that this is a JSON object with class, with property class and value web programming. So if we just did that, so that's how we get the data out. Okay, so now that we have the data, we do some stuff with it. That's just in a comment. And after that, we send some data back to the server. So that's in the res.send at the bottom. Okay, so this sort of seems like black magic right now, but you can actually take a look at what the browser is doing under the hood a little bit. So this is your Chrome inspector, for those of you using Chrome. And if you go to the network tab instead of the elements tab at the top, it's up there, you can see that this is the request that we just made. So as you make a bunch of AJAX requests, you can see these things pop up, and you can actually examine them even further. So if you click on that, then you get this lovely window, and you can sort of see like what you did. So this is the request URL. So as you saw before, we sent a AJAX request to /search, and this is how the browser figures out, like, cobbles together all the pieces that you gave it to construct that request. So you can see the method is get, some other stuff that you don't really know about, but those are the two big parts. So this is what can help you debug if you don't know what's going on with the requests. Okay, so if you scroll to the bottom of that, then you can see the query string parameters. So this is the data that you're sending to the server. As you can see, we have a property class and value buffer. Okay. So now you can actually look at the data that's given back to you. So if you look at preview, then you get this data object, and you can even expand it inside this window and sort of like look around, poke around a bit before you play around with it. So this is just an example. Yeah. So you can do this with any kind of request. If you open up Facebook, you look at some of the requests, you can sort of see what data is being transferred between your browser and this Facebook server. Okay. So let's do a workshop.